This is Ellie. Ellie just graduated from witch's school and is well on her way to the next phase of her education, becoming a witch's apprentice. There's only one problem. You see, Ellie is experiencing an emotion that I feel every day. That is burnout.
No!
You see, despite graduating magna cum laude from school, despite learning all the cool witchy things and making potions and having a hat that talks to her, Ellie's tired. She doesn't want to be a witch's apprentice. She doesn't want to spend 3 more years working on her education, and she really doesn't want to sit on a train with nothing to do for the next 3 days. This is the story about a young witch who accidentally on purpose gets to live the life I wanted after I finished school. Living in a super cute, rad house, doing only what she wants to do all day, and avoiding all of her real-life adult responsibilities. This is her story. Now, before we get too far in the story, I do want to warn that this game comes with a few adult words in the storytelling. It's not much and it's not often, but they do exist, and I did have to edit them out of the video. I only say this for anyone who's sensitive to dirty wordies and wants to remove this from their gaming experience. This game does have them, though they're small, they do exist. The story starts with Ellie on a train bound for High Lion, a city in which Ellie is to meet her new master witch and begin her apprenticeship. She's accompanied by her best friend and my favorite character, Virgil, the talking hat. He's got blue eyes and a blue mouth and is a true smart aleck. Everything you could want in a hat. We spend a little time learning the game mechanics and being introduced to the absolutely charming character art included in this game before Ellie starts to show just how much she doesn't want to be on this trip. She complains for a few minutes before getting distracted by an absolutely lovely glowing tree that she can see from her seat on the train. She quickly descends into praying for some type of bad luck to happen to the train, just so she doesn't have to start her apprenticeship. A train crash, being attacked by wild animals, or even being the victim of a train robbery, it doesn't matter to Ellie. As luck would have it, the train actually does experience some technical difficulties and has to stop in the middle of the woods. Some kind of briar has grown over the train tracks and the train can't keep going. Ellie sees this as an excellent chance to escape the train and explore the surrounding woods. Before she leaves, she's given a very strict warning by the conductor that the train will almost certainly take off in the morning and will actually take off as soon as repairs are done, regardless of what time that is, even if it's not morning yet, and even if Ellie doesn't make it back to the train. Never one to be swayed by reason or an overarching sense that missing the train could be wasting years of hard work, Ellie quickly hops off the train and begins her exploration. Virgil is less than excited for this turn of events. After climbing up some vines and walking up a mysterious-looking break in the trees which creates a convenient path straight into the middle of the woods, we come across the Green Forest Plains. We spend some time walking around lost and picking up random forageable items before getting confused by some lovely glowing flowers that don't seem to drop any loot but do make a cute little musical sound whenever we run into them. We then discover a strange-looking door that leads into the edge of a cliff. Naturally, we stop and give it a quick look over, and as we do, Virgil drops a bit of foreshadowing that perhaps I might have seen this door before, but it doesn't really matter since I don't plan on moving here. Thanks, Virgil. We continue our search for the glowing tree and see a few glowing butterflies, shake a bush that seems to have a glowing golden bug, which is surely not inspired by the golden snitch from a certain popular book and movie franchise, before we finally come across a glowing spot on the ground in front of some asparagus-shaped prison bars growing out of the dirt. As Ellie's looking at these bars, she remembers that the glowing mark is actually a witch's sigil, and she knows how to activate the sigil from her time in school. We do a little glowy magic, and the asparagus prison bars shrink back into the ground. However, because I personally hate moving on to new areas before exploring all of the currently available areas, we don't go through the new pathway yet and instead take a short detour only to find a floating sky bridge leading to the Green Forest waterfall. This bridge, however, is locked behind some similar asparagus-shaped prison bars, but this time the glowing sigil is on the other side of the bars and we can't get through. So we turn back around and go to the newly opened passageway and make our way up to the glowing mountain tree. I take a bit of time to appreciate just how beautiful the tree and the butterflies are before Virgil starts a lesson and starts telling us about this tree and the butterflies and how they're supposedly very special. You see, apparently this tree is a bitter grape tea tree, and it's actually the butterflies, not the tree, which is causing this shining effect. In fact, these butterflies are not just any ordinary butterflies, but are the blue moon butterflies, and the light they give off has the same power as the actual moon. He then tells us that it's pretty rare to find this tree and these butterflies in the same place. Apparently, it's pretty common for witches to force them to be together to create this special thing called a moonflower. but it's not very common to see them do this in nature. As you see here, the word moonflower is in red, so I assume it has to be something special and important for the future, but honestly, I don't really know what we're doing at this point. Anyway, let's put a pin in that for now and move on to more important things, like learning new game mechanics and finding a place to sleep for the night. We learn how to take notes about the things that we discover in the world around us by observing the new item and then having our magic pen take notes for us in our journal. We must know that this pen is magic because, despite the fact our girl Ellie is obviously very smart, she doesn't know anything about this place, but the journal is suddenly full of all sorts of information as soon as you record the new item for the first time. We climb a few vines, discover a random pink flower that's covered by a ray of light, and then find a treasure chest containing some white chalk and money before coming across a glowing kitty, which, as I script this video, I realize that we literally never see again. And this cat leads us to a broken witch's sigil in the ground, which controls yet another set of asparagus-shaped prison bars. We use our freshly discovered chalk to redraw the sigil and make our way to the witch's garden. A charming little house in the middle of the woods with the lights already on, but somehow also mysteriously empty. We take a moment to mourn the loss of our new feline friend before exploring the random, totally not dubiously placed house in the middle of the woods. To our credit, we do knock on the door before barging right in and acting like we own the place. Inside, we find a room covered in spiderwebs and a small bed along with some books. Now, even though I personally grew up in the country, I've lived in the city for the last 10 years and have left my country roots behind. The thought of sleeping in a bed likely covered in spiders and almost certainly slept in by some unknown person before me without washing the sheets would have been enough to turn me away, but not Ellie. No sirree. She looks at it and goes, "Yep, this looks like home," and just goes ahead and hops right in the bed, ready for a good night's sleep. Ellie wakes up the next morning upset because she had the absolute misfortune of dreaming that she was sleeping on the train rather than sleeping in some random witch's bed in the middle of the woods. Virgil, understandably so, is upset since it seems like a huge waste for us to have done all this work, walked around outside for no reason, and risked our apprenticeship only to have still had a bad night's sleep. We make it outside and realize that we can hear the train whistle from the house and figure we probably should start heading that way. Ellie reassures herself that she's totally fine and can do no wrong before we start heading towards the train. Now, as Ellie's studious helper, I am ashamed to admit that I got distracted on my way to the train and had to spend a good bit of time looking around and collecting items. In my defense, do you see how cute these little squishy things are? And you can collect their fur by squishing their cheeks. Can you really blame me for getting distracted? The answer is no. No, you cannot. And if you had the audacity to answer incorrectly and answer yes instead of no, just know that I still love and appreciate you, but we really need to work on getting you some lessons in exploration and whimsy. We finally get serious about making it back to the train and start our way back down the mysterious, tree-ridden forest path. We finally make it back to the train tracks only to find that the train is gone, and in its place is a bird that seems to be some kind of mystical cross between an ostrich and a toucan. It turns out that the train whistle we could hear from the house and the whole time we were exploring wasn't actually from the train, but was from this strange bird creature, which apparently can emulate the sound it hears so well that it had Ellie, Virgil, and me convinced that we could still hear the train. We looked around a bit and find a shiny letter conveniently placed on a tree stump right near our climbing vines. It turns out that the issue with the train was quickly resolved and that the train started back on its journey shortly after it was stopped. In fact, it probably happened while we were busy out collecting items and looking at a pretty tree. Of course, the train can't just sit around waiting for one reluctant witch's apprentice in her magical talking hat, so they went ahead and left. The good news is that the train will pass back by at some point and we can just hang out in the village until then. The bad news is that we're stranded in the middle of the woods with no luggage, no money, and no estimation on when the train will be back to collect us. Now, I would personally be devastated by this turn of events. Again, I am a converted country girl. I worked on my flower beds this morning pulling weeds and turning my front yard from an overgrown weed yard into a controlled chaos weed yard so that parents feel comfortable allowing their children to stop by my house for Halloween this year to collect candy, only to find that a bug had crawled on my shoulder. I quickly asked husband to get the bug off of me and asked him to tell me what kind of bug it was, only to stop him as he tried to tell me because I gagged at the thought of the bug being on me and told him to keep this information to himself. So, being stuck in the woods without any of my creature comforts and no idea of when I'm going to be picked up seems like quite a terrible idea to me. But Ellie does not share my reservations. Ellie feels none of my personal reluctance and is excited for this brief distraction from starting her apprenticeship. We go back into the woods and start looking around for the village, and we find a super helpful sign right after a bit of exploration that shows that the village is just to the east of our current location. Full of zeal and ready to see a new area, we head off to the east only to find that the entrance to the village is blocked by a cute little plant named Little Honey Pumpkin, and that we can't get past the vines on our own. Virgil, ever the pragmatist, suggests that we return to the witch's house to do a little research and cleaning. Ellie agrees to this plan, even if it is a somewhat begrudging agreement, and we return to the witch's cottage, hopeful to find some information telling us how to rid the path of the cute but obstructive Little Honey Pumpkin plant. We start our task of tidying up the witch's house by pulling up all the weeds that have grown up in the front yard. This would not be the most pressing chore task if I were in charge of the situation, especially given the fact that we have to pull all the weeds by hand and don't even have any gloves to wear while we do it, but Virgil and Ellie have very different ideas. We get all the weeds pulled up and head inside before starting the equally unappealing task of cleaning up all the spider webs that have grown up all over the house. Ellie's sure to let us know that the house is super messy, and Virgil is quick to remind her that her bedroom back home is just as messy. Finally, our hard work pays off. We get to a bookshelf that's cleared off enough that we can begin some real research into how to remove the Little Honey Pumpkin that blocks the village path. It turns out that the last witch that lived here was quite the plant enthusiast, and there are several books on plants just sitting on these shelves. We pause our exploration of the bookshelf to finish our cleaning task and are rewarded by discovering an elevator leading to the basement of this small witch's house. Now, a normal person might show the slightest bit of apprehension at descending into the depths of a random witch's house in the middle of the woods, but I think it's clear at this point that Ellie is not a normal person. We decide to get onto the elevator and travel into the basement of this witch's house. The elevator leads to the witch's workshop. Apparently,
Whoa.
the witch's workshop is a dispensary, which is a place that witches use to make potions. There's some very cool stuff going on down here. It is just as messy as the upstairs portion of the house, and we have to spend some quality time giving it a quick cleaning. The first thing we cleaned is something called an extractor, which is apparently something that we need to create potions. Unfortunately, however, the glass bottle for the extractor is broken, and we need to find a replacement bottle before we'll be able to do anything with it. Maybe we'll be able to find one in the village? We pick up some random potion ingredients that the last witch left lying around on the floor for some reason, and admire the fancy cauldron sitting in the middle of the room before moving on to cleaning the storage chest at the back of the room. Now, at this point, I had spent several minutes off camera worrying about the apparent lack of storage space in this game, and I was very excited for this find. I went ahead and emptied out my pockets and moved on to the other side of the room where we discovered a roaster, which, much like the extractor, we can't use yet because it's missing its rotating handle. Still, we hold out hope that we can find the handle in the village later on. Finally, we clean off the workbench and discover a mysterious recipe for moon oil, which apparently will give us the power of the moon, if we could ever figure out how to make it. We're going to need a moonflower and a phoenix feather to prepare this recipe, and Virgil dashes our hopes by letting us know that these are expensive ingredients and are very hard to come by. We also discover a second recipe, but unlike the moon oil recipe, this one is in a different language, which Virgil informs us is called ancient witch language. Apparently, Ellie learned this language while she was in school, but doesn't remember enough to actually help us read anything. The only thing she was able to tell us from this recipe is that it probably has something to do with the moon and that her head hurts while she's trying to read it. I'm here to tell you that I can absolutely relate to her predicament and couldn't tell you much about some of the classes I took in law school, but do remember the headache they caused. After finishing our chores, we decided to try our hand at brewing our first potion. We decided to settle on the Weed Terminator potion as our very first experiment. And I have to admit, I made several mistakes during the brewing of this first potion. While it is probably true that the tutorial could have been slightly more clear on how to brew potions, the vast majority of the mistakes I made were purely user error, like for instance, the time I started stirring the pot in the wrong direction. At 28 years old, apparently I am still fully beaten by the concept of clockwise and counterclockwise motion. Look, I'm smart, but sometimes I save all the smart for work and forget that I can use it in my off time as well. Brewing potions honestly isn't that hard. The recipe will show up on the right of the screen and will show you the steps you need to take and in what order. The order can change with each recipe, but the basic mechanics remain the same. You put the ingredients in the pot in the right order, you stir the pot in the correct direction by holding the Joy-Con to either the left or the right, and you make sure that you hold the fire at a certain temperature the entire time. There are some challenges to the recipes though. For instance, while you're stirring the pot, you might be forced to stop stirring for a few seconds, or your ladle might get stuck and you have to keep getting it unstuck. And keeping a consistent temperature on the fire does require you to continually click a button while you're doing so. It honestly felt a bit like the fishing in Stardew Valley, where you have to keep clicking the button and keep the bobber in the right place. It was just a balancing act that honestly wasn't that hard after you got the hang of it. After some quick panic, we finish our task and score a 9 out of 100 on our very first potion. I told myself that if you start at the bottom, then you have nowhere to go but up. I'm not sure if that's really true, but at least it gave me some comfort at the time. We gather our potion and start the journey back to the little honey pumpkin blocking our path to the village. Again, as always, we take some time to pet the cute, squishy chubs along the way. We bebop our way along the path until we finally make it to the little honey pumpkin vines blocking the way to the village. I go ahead and toss the Weed Terminator potion on the little honey pumpkin and watch in amazement and the slightest bit of panic as the vines slowly recede. You see, if I'm too slow, the vines will grow back before I make it to the heart of the little honey pumpkin, and then I'll be in a real pickle because I'll be out of ingredients and won't be able to make a new batch of the Weed Terminator potion. My fears were unfounded though, because the game gave me plenty of time to make it to the heart of the plant and we popped it out of the ground with no problem. Finally, we can get moving towards the village. I do the sensible thing of stopping at the treasure chest and collecting my goodies before moving on, only to realize that this isn't even the village. We've been catfished. Instead of finding the village, we find yet another set of vines blocking our path, only this time they're huge, and there is no way we are getting past these pointy-looking things with just the power of our Weed Terminator potion alone. We're going to need to call in reinforcements and find a much more powerful potion to get this thing moving. Even though we don't make it to the village, we did stumble across an absolutely adorable girl and her sleeping giant pet, and she had some pretty interesting things to say. As an aside, husband and I had a bit of a debate on how to pronounce her name, and he seems to think it's something along the lines of Araya. My only other thought was that maybe it was Aria, but that really doesn't make much sense either, so we're gonna go with husband's pronunciation. Turns out that this girl loves nature. No, really, she loves nature. And while I too am a big fan of nature and was just like, oh, she's a little extra about it, but I'll let it slide since this is a video game and characters can sometimes be a bit one note. Virgil seems to think that there might be something a little odd about this girl and that she was probably cursed by a nature-loving witch. The bad news is that we have to figure out how to break her curse. The good news is that we just so happen to already know the recipe for curse-lifting candy, and we just so happen to have the ingredients for the recipe in our possession. Thank you to the random witch who left her house in the middle of the woods for a young girl to claim as her own through the very American concept of adverse possession. If you happen to be an attorney or attorney adjacent, you know what I mean. If not, just think something along the lines of squatters' rights. The best news is that our nature-loving merchant just so happens to have a glass bottle that would work as the perfect replacement for a broken glass bottle for our extractor back at the witch's house. With the knowledge that we might be able to lift the curse on our merchant and find more information about the village and, more importantly, low-key coerce her into giving us a glass bottle in exchange for our help, we head back to the witch's house to make our second concoction in the cauldron. Using the cauldron went much more smoothly this time. I even managed to stir the pot in the right direction. Ha! Go me. We put in all our ingredients and stirred and heated the cauldron to the cauldron's desires, and out popped a curse-lifting candy with a score of 95 out of 100. I collected my hard-earned potion and started to head back to the cursed merchant, but got distracted by being sleepy, so I decided to take a 2-hour nap along the way. Mood. After my nap, I got distracted again by these cute little gremlin-looking pumpkin terrier thingies. I did a little observation in my journal and then chased them around for a few minutes to get some snuggles. I'm sure they actually wanted pets, they were just afraid to show it. That's probably why they kept running away each time I started petting them. Finally, several pets and distractions later, we're on our way to saving our cute little cursed merchant. We make it back to our girl and give her the curse-lifting candy, and she is so excited to talk normal again and confirmed our suspicion that she'd been under a curse this whole time. Apparently, she met a strange man in the middle of the woods and bought a monkey statue from him, only to find that she could only use her words to praise nature after that. Probably not something I would have done, but this isn't really my story. I guess the moral of her story is that if you meet a strange man in the middle of the woods and he has a random monkey statue for sale, this is definitely a buy at your own risk kind of situation. Apparently, she doesn't actually care about nature that much and actually hopes that nature, and I quote, just rots and dies. Personally, I was less than enthused when I heard this from her, and honestly, she went down in cuteness by several large points after this. What can I say? We are nature supporters in my household. Araya, much like us, was on her way to the village and was stopped by the second set of large vines blocking her path. She doesn't have a solution for us, but is more than happy to profit off of our hard work if we ever do manage to get the vines removed. Now that the talk of the village is out of the way, we can move on to more important things, like asking Araya if she happens to have a glass bottle that she's willing to part with. Virgil is quick to remind us that we don't actually have any money, but this is actually technically untrue, since we did get some money from our first treasure chest. Ellie, however, is not concerned. If I'm honest, I get the vibe that Ellie has no intention of paying for this glass bottle and just plans to take it as compensation for lifting her curse. Legally speaking, I think Ellie is on the losing side of the law at this point, but we're not working with attorneys here, we're working with magical witches and talking cats in the middle of the woods, and I think it's safe to say that the normal rules don't apply here. Luckily, Araya is feeling pretty charitable and gives us a glass bottle out of the goodness of her heart. What a doll! She gives us an atlas, which is a fancy way of saying a collection of maps that we can access without having to find those little map stands strewn about the different areas that we visit. And she gives us a recipe for a healing candy, which can be used to heal light wounds. This does give me a bit of pause because, like, what kind of combat are we about to get ourselves into if we need a healing potion, right? Like, I'm here for cute creatures and the lovely color palette, not the combat. But we take our healing potion and give Araya an appropriate amount of hype for being so kind and giving before heading back to another round of foraging and chasing down reluctantly petted pumpkin terriers. While we're out exploring, we come back across that strange door that leads into the edge of the cliff and decide to give it a more in-depth inspection. Virgil, ever the slightly deprecating assistant that he is, reminds Ellie that she's actually seen one of these before, and Ellie, after reminding him that she's learned a lot of things in school and doesn't necessarily remember all of them, lets us know that she does actually remember what this one is. It's a witch's station, and it's used to teleport from one place to another to save time. This one, however, is broken down and is in need of repair. Luckily, the powers that be in the witches' world have standardized the maintenance on witches' stations to make sure that they're easy to repair even if you're not the one who initially created the station. If only my country would invest in such a reasonable concept. After some more investigation, we realize that we have all of the necessary materials to get the station up and running again. It only took 3 branches. After handing over our branches, the door is repaired and is covered in pretty pink flowers that seem to match the door right outside the witch's house. We go ahead and turn on the witch's station, and sure enough, the station is going to take us straight back home. I do my usual loot goblin thing and pick up a few more supplies before hopping into the witch's station and teleporting back to the witch's house. Since it's only 8 o'clock in the evening, I decide to capitalize on our time by taking our brand new glass bottle straight to the workshop. At this point, I'm not even sure what I can make with the extractor, but I know that I want to make at least something before heading to bed. My plans of becoming a master mixologist are interrupted as Virgil and Ellie decide that this is the perfect time to discuss our current predicament of being stuck in the middle of the woods with a monster vine blocking our path to civilization. And it turns out their only suggestion is to just look around some more outside and see if there's some other areas that we can unlock that are going to help with the task. With that out of the way, we make our way back to the important things, like using the extractor. The best way I can describe the extractor is that it's like a juicer that turns all kinds of ingredients into a liquid form, regardless of what it starts as. We made some witch's flower extract from the green leaves I've been picking up outside, and some squishy chub fur extract from the little yellow squishy things that I'm slightly obsessed with. Since we're already down here and have the ingredients to make some more Weed Terminator potion, I decided to go ahead and brew 2 more sets of the potion just in case we might need some in the future.
Whoa!
At this point, you might think it's time for us to head to bed and start getting ready for a new day, but you would be wrong. You see, we have 40 more stamina points, and I'm a loot gremlin, and I still have a few more items to pick up before the day's over. I go ahead and head outside only to be met with a very loud and slightly obnoxious crow who goes on and on about how the witches returned to the house, and then he starts giving us an advertisement about the witches catalog, which Ellie is apparently super excited to try out. It turns out she's heard great things about the witches catalog and has always wanted to give it a shot. Ellie's excitement aside, I can't really tell if the crow's doing a bit of foreshadowing or if he's just excited to have anyone at the house to sell to. The crow lets us know that there's a limited time offer to receive a gift after registration, but we need to go ahead and register now. He makes sure to point out that it's a limited time offer, which is enough to get Ellie on board. And as a connoisseur of unnecessary seasonal items myself, I can absolutely understand how she could be swayed by the knowledge that this is a limited time offer. Virgil puts in his 2 cents by letting us know it probably couldn't hurt to have access to a wider array of ingredients and recipes, so we go ahead and register for the Witches Catalog and hope that this offer isn't too good to be true. The crow lets us know that the Witches Catalog is closed for the day, but an employee will be available tomorrow to help us if we happen to need anything. With the crow gone, I'm finally able to do a little bit more looking around and picking up forageables before running out of stamina and finally deciding that it's time to head to bed. We run back to the house and hop in bed for what is hopefully a more restful night of sleep than the night before. And with that, this brings us to the end of our first episode of Exploring the Woods with Ellie, the burnout witch, and the Little Witch of the Woods. This is my first ever scripted video, and I honestly had more fun preparing this than I ever anticipated I would, and I'm excited for other episodes in the future. If you want to see more episodes like this or videos with a cozy vibe where we explore the story of some of the cutest games out there like Fields of Mysteria and Palia, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. It honestly helps more than you know, and I really appreciate it. Normally, I put out a weekly episode of an ongoing series, but the month of October is special to me, so we're going to be doing something a little bit different this month. Each week, I'm going to put out a new video showcasing a different spooky-themed game in honor of my favorite month. I have several great games lined up, so hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you back here next week with our next spooky game. I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.